When that HOA president rushed onto my family farm yelling about my fence, I never imagined she'd threaten to bankrupt me, sabotage my livestock safety, or have me detained on my own property. My grandfather's 70-year heritage hung in the balance as my animals were now exposed to predators. Was I about to lose 3 generations of hard work because some power-hungry HOA wanted my land? Howdy, folks. Jim Harrington here, third-generation farmer on this 48-acre homestead that my grandfather purchased with his military service money back in 1952. For 70 years, we raised our families and livestock in peace until developers transformed our quiet countryside into Oakwood estates, bringing their rule guides, restrictions, and a particularly vengeful HOA president named Brenda Wilson. When they first broke ground 5 years ago, I wasn't worried. My deed explicitly stated my property was exempt from their jurisdiction, legally grandfathered with agricultural zoning. But as I'd soon realize, people like Brenda don't care about legal papers when they're focused to get what they want, and what she wanted, as I learned the hard way, was my family's land no matter what it took to get it. Last month, tragedy struck. I woke to find 3 of my prized sheep, animals worth thousands each, attacked by wild dogs that had slipped through my aging fence line. The night camera showed them easily jumping the 4-foot barrier my father installed 30 years ago. With more livestock exposed and breeding season approaching, I faced possible financial collapse if I didn't act fast. The loss hit me hard. These weren't just livestock, they were offspring of the original flock my grandfather started. Each morning for weeks after, I'd check my remaining animals with growing worry, wondering if they'd be next. My veterinarian cautioned me that predator patterns indicated more attacks were likely. Insurance would only cover a fraction of future losses. After seeking county regulations and confirming my property lines with official surveys, I invested $88,000, nearly all my savings, in supplies for a new 6-foot reinforced fence. I researched the best predator-resistant designs, spent hours planning the setup, and scheduled my neighbor's son to help with construction. The morning I began digging post holes, I felt a sense of comfort knowing my animals would finally be safe again. That feeling lasted exactly 43 minutes. "You can't build that eyesore here," she shouted, waving a rule handbook like a tool. Section 8.3 clearly states, "No structures exceeding 4 feet without board approval." This breaks our visual standards. I calmly explained my property wasn't part of their HOA, showing her my deed and agricultural exemption. She wouldn't even look at the documents. "This entire area falls under our jurisdiction now," she snapped, pulling out her device. "I'm calling a board meeting tonight. You have until tomorrow to remove all this or face daily fines of $250, retroactive to today. Tomorrow to remove all this or face daily fines of $250, retroactive to today." As she left, she turned back with a cold smile. "You should know the last 3 holdouts who fought us are gone now. You might want to ask yourself why." "Stop that immediately." The voice cut through the morning air as a black Lexus screeched to a halt, kicking up dust across my defense line. Out stepped Brenda Wilson, HOA president, designer sunglasses perched on her perfectly styled hair, Italian leather heels sinking into my farmland as she rushed over. "You can't build that eyesore here," she shouted, waving a rule handbook like a weapon. Section 8.3 clearly states no structures exceeding 4 feet without board approval. This breaks our visual standards. I calmly explained my property wasn't part of their HOA, showing her my deed and agricultural exemption. She wouldn't even look at the documents. "This entire area falls under our control now," she snapped, pulling out her device. "I'm calling a board meeting tonight. You have until tomorrow to remove all this or face daily fines of $250, retroactive to today." I stood my ground. "Ma'am, I've lost valuable livestock. This fence is necessary and completely legal under county agricultural zoning." Her face tightened. "Do you have any idea who my husband is? He's on the county zoning board. One phone call from him, and your precious agricultural status could be under review." I felt my blood pressure rising, but kept my voice steady. "That sounded an awful lot like a threat." "It's a reality check," she countered, examining her polished nails. Oakwood Estates has a vision for this community, and frankly, your outdated farm doesn't fit that vision. We've already had complaints about animal odors and noise. The board is considering action regarding nuisance properties. As she turned to leave, she paused dramatically. You know, selling might be your best option. Meridian Development has expressed interest in properties like yours. We could facilitate a quick sale before these violations become expensive. As she left, she turned back with a chilling smile. You should know the last 3 holdouts who fought us are gone now. You might want to ask yourself why. That evening, my neighbor Dale, who reluctantly joined the HOA when the development expanded, called to warn me. Jim, I was at their emergency meeting. Brenda's gunning for you hard, but here's something interesting. 2 board members actually questioned her authority over your property. She shut them down, but I could tell they weren't convinced. This small crack in their unified front gave me hope. I wasn't completely alone in this fight. Dale also revealed something crucial. Brenda had specifically mentioned my prime location and development potential during a private conversation before the meeting started. She kept talking about Phase 3 expansion and how your property was the perfect connector parcel. Dale whispered, Jim, I don't think this is about your fence at all. Something bigger is happening here, and you're standing in their way. In their way. By morning, certified letters threatening legal action arrived. Rather than backing down, I consulted attorney Sarah Reynolds, who specialized in property disputes. After reviewing my documents, her eyes widened. Jim, you're not just in the right. You have ironclad proof. Their HOA boundaries explicitly exclude your property. Their own development plans, filed with the county, show your land clearly outside their jurisdiction. She drafted a cease and desist letter, and I continued building my fence the next day. This time, with security cameras positioned strategically around the perimeter. 3 hours later, Brenda returned with 2 board members and the development company's attorney. They photographed every post, measured the fence height repeatedly, and placed official-looking violation notices along my property line. When I presented my lawyer's letter, Brenda actually laughed. We have 3 attorneys on retainer. She smirked. We can tie this up in court until your farm fails and you're forced to sell. Ask yourself, is that fence really worth losing everything your grandfather built? The attorney beside her added coldly, agricultural exemptions can be challenged. We have substantial resources to pursue every avenue available. Do you? I stood my ground, but their confidence unnerved me. That night, I discovered they'd filed complaints with animal control, the environmental department, and even reported suspicious activity to local police. Each complaint required my response, eating away at my time and resources, exactly as they'd planned. That night, as I reviewed my security footage, I noticed something odd. Brenda's husband lingering behind while the others left, taking photos of my livestock pens and water system. When I zoomed in on his phone screen, I could make out what looked like property assessments. I forwarded the footage to my attorney, who called me immediately. Jim, this is a pattern I've seen before. They're documenting possible violations while actually assessing your property value. Keep that camera rolling. We're building our counter case. The next morning, I received an unexpected call from a county inspector named Mike. Mr. Harrington, someone requested an urgent review of your property, claiming environmental hazards. I looked at your file, and something doesn't add up. Would you mind if I came out to speak with you off the record? I think you're being targeted. 2 mornings later, I discovered fence posts damaged and wiring cut in 3 locations. Not enough to be immediately obvious, but strategically placed to create future failures. My security camera had captured a hooded figure at 2:17 a.m., but their face was invisible. The same day, I received notice that the HOA had filed a formal complaint with the county, alleging multiple code violations. More disturbing was the letter from my insurance company questioning my policy coverage based on reports of unsafe agricultural practices. My elderly neighbors, Ed and Martha, called in tears. They'd received formal warnings about association with non-compliant properties, threatening their standing in the community. The pressure tactics were expanding beyond me. When I arrived home, Thursday evening, A sheriff's officer was waiting with a stop work order based on the HOA's complaint. I couldn't believe it. They'd somehow convinced county officials I was violating building codes that didn't even apply to agricultural property. "I'm just doing my job, sir," the deputy said apologetically, "but between you and me, something about this doesn't smell right. Too many strings being pulled too quickly." That night, I discovered my water had been shut off. The utility company claimed they'd received reports of illegal connections. My livestock now had no water, creating an immediate crisis. I was forced to pay an emergency inspection fee of $350 to have service restored. By morning, the inspector found nothing wrong, but whispered, "Someone's got it out for you, friend." With my fence project halted and livestock exposed, I spent a sleepless night searching through county records online. By dawn, I found something explosive. Original planning documents and email communications showed systematic HOA overreach across multiple properties. More shocking, Brenda's husband, James, worked as acquisition director for Meridian Development Group, the same company that built Oakwood Estates. They were actively planning Phase 3 expansion directly over where my farm stood. The HOA wasn't just being difficult, they were acting as the enforcement arm for a corporate land grab. Further digging revealed 6 other property owners, mostly elderly widows and a disabled veteran, had been forced out through similar harassment campaigns in the past 18 months. Each property sold significantly below market value to shell companies that traced back to Meridian. I discovered a pattern of suspicious rezoning applications that always seemed to get fast-tracked through the system. The connection? James Wilson sat on the county zoning advisory board, a clear conflict of interest he'd never disclosed. The deeper I dug, the worse it got. There were campaign contributions to local officials who had supported Meridian's projects, consulting fees paid to family members of planning commission officers, and even evidence that environmental impact reports had been altered to hide concerns about wetland destruction on adjacent properties. Armed with this evidence, I reached out to those former owners, for agreed to provide sworn affidavits about the harassment tactics used against them. The disabled veteran, a former legal assistant, had kept detailed records, including threatening voicemails for Brenda. I knew something wasn't right, he told me, but they threatened to challenge my disability accommodations if I didn't sell. I couldn't risk losing my benefits in a legal battle. His documentation included a damning email where Brenda discussed applying maximum pressure to undesirable properties and expediting acquisition through regulatory enforcement. I also discovered that one elderly couple had recorded their conversation with James Wilson, where he explicitly mentioned using HOA violations as leverage to force a sale. This recording alone is enough to launch an investigation, my attorney confirmed, her eyes lighting up as she listened to the audio. My attorney helped me file a comprehensive countersuit, alleging harassment, conspiracy, property damage, and fraudulent misrepresentation of HOA authority, but we needed more concrete evidence to stop them permanently. My neighbor's son, Tyler, a cybersecurity specialist, volunteered to help set up enhanced surveillance, with motion-activated recording and night vision. My parents joined the HOA under duress. He explained, "They're too afraid to fight openly, but this is my way of helping." Within 3 days, our patience paid off. The cameras captured crystal-clear footage of James Wilson and another man tampering with my fence and placing something near my water supply at 1:43 a.m. When I investigated, I discovered they planted evidence of environmental contamination. Motor oil strategically placed to suggest I was polluting groundwater. I immediately reported the vandalism, trespassing, and attempted framing to authorities, providing the unedited footage as evidence. Meanwhile, I contacted Melissa Ramirez of the County Chronicle with documentation of the HOA's boundary violations and corporate connections. "This isn't just your typical neighbor dispute," she realized. "This is organized real estate fraud, targeting exposed property owners." The pieces were falling into place, but I knew Brenda and her allies wouldn't go down without a fight. With the evidence mounting, we prepared for the confrontation that would determine not just my farm's future, but justice for everyone they targeted. The newspaper investigation prompted the county environmental inspector to re-examine my property. Not only did he clear me of all alleged violations, but he also provided a written statement confirming my agricultural exemptions. In my 20 years with the county, he confided, I've never seen such blatant misrepresentation of regulations. Someone in the permits office has been processing complaints without proper verification. That someone turned out to be Brenda's cousin, another connection we added to our growing evidence board. The web of corruption was larger than I'd imagined. 2 days later, 3 other HOA members contacted me confidentially. They'd been questioning their rising association fees and discovered large payments to legal firms that weren't properly documented. We think they've been using our dues to fund their harassment campaign. One whispered, we've got the financial records to prove it. Armed with overwhelming evidence, I attended the next HOA meeting uninvited and with Melissa from the County Chronicle beside me. Brenda tried having security remove us, but I stood my ground. Before anyone calls security, I announced at the Pack Community Center, every homeowner here deserves to know that this HOA has been operating illegally. I projected maps showing their actual legal boundaries versus their claimed jurisdiction. Your board has been systematically targeting properties outside their authority. I continued, revealing the connection to Meridian Development. While claiming to protect property values, they've been deliberately devaluing targeted properties for corporate acquisition. When Brenda attempted to shut down the presentation, I played the security footage showing her husband vandalizing my property. The room erupted in shocked outrage as homeowners realized they'd been manipulated. How many of you have received arbitrary fines? I asked. Dozens of hands went up. Those funds haven't gone to community improvements. They financed legal intimidation against your neighbors. A retired judge living in the community stood up. As a new resident, I was told certain areas were problem properties. Now I understand why. This isn't just unethical, it's criminal conspiracy and fraud. Brenda tried to regain control, her voice shrill. These are baseless accusations. This farmer is just trying to avoid compliance with community standards that protect your property values. That's when Martha, my 78-year-old neighbor, slowly rose from her seat. Mrs. Wilson, you threatened to fine me $500 a day because my late husband's memorial garden exceeded your height restrictions. You said I'd lose my home if I didn't remove it. Her voice trembled but remained strong. Now I understand. You wanted our land for your husband's company. The financial officer of the HOA, visibly shaken, admitted, I've questioned several payments to legal firms targeting non-HOA properties. When I asked for documentation, I was removed from the email thread and told it was handled at a higher level. The story broke on the front page of the County Chronicle the following morning. By noon, the district attorney had opened an investigation into the HOA board's practices, and the county commissioners had suspended their operational permit pending review. 3 board members immediately resigned, distancing themselves from Brenda and claiming they were misled about jurisdictional boundaries. Internal HOA documents were subpoenaed, revealing financial kickbacks and coordinated harassment campaigns. Most satisfying, the sheriff personally came to remove the stop work order and apologize. Someone misrepresented your property classification, he explained. We're investigating who altered those records in our system. My fence was completed the following weekend with help from over 20 neighbors who'd finally seen the HOA's true colors. They arrived with tools, supplies, and determination to right the wrong done to my property. Even some HOA members joined in, bringing food and support. We bought here for community, one new resident told me, not to be part of a land-grabbing scheme. We want to be good neighbors. The county commissioner herself stopped by during construction. Mr. Harrington, your stand against corruption has exposed systemic problems. We're now addressing them. Thank you for your courage. As news spread, 3 more families came forward with similar stories of HOA harassment. The district attorney expanded the investigation to include possible racketeering charges. Brenda and James Wilson were seen leaving their home with suitcases, but state troopers intercepted them before they could board a flight to Cancun. The most unexpected development. The CEO of Meridian Development was forced to call an emergency board meeting as their stock plummeted 27% in a single day. Investors were abandoning ship as the scandal threatened to expose similar schemes in 3 other counties. The investigation revealed that Brenda and James Wilson had received $75,000 in undisclosed acquisition bonuses for each property they helped Meridian obtain. They now faced multiple criminal charges, including fraud, conspiracy, falsification of records, and criminal mischief. Meridian Development's permits were suspended, pending regulatory review, and their Phase 3 expansion plans were permanently rejected by the county commission. The company's stock plummeted when investors learned of their tactics. The HOA underwent complete restructuring with transparent boundaries and new leadership elected by homeowners committed to actual community improvement. Their first official act? Creating a neighborhood integrity committee to prevent future abuses of power. For former owners who'd been forced out received substantial settlements, allowing them to repurchase their properties if desired. Others received financial compensation for their losses. As for my farm, it's not just surviving, it's thriving. With proper safety, my livestock is safe again. I've even expanded operations, adding a small farm-to-table program that many Oakwood residents now enthusiastically support. The new HOA even feature my farm in their community newsletter as a valued historical neighbor. Standing up to the HOA wasn't just about protecting my fence or farm. It exposed a systemic abuse targeting exposed property owners throughout our community. If I'd surrendered to intimidation, others would have continued losing their homes and livelihoods to corporate greed disguised as community standards. This experience taught me that sometimes defending your property means more than asserting legal rights. It means standing firm against corruption that threatens everyone. True community doesn't come from enforcing arbitrary rules. It comes from neighbors respecting each other's rights and working together against those who would exploit us. What started as a simple fence to protect my animals ended up protecting an entire community. The ordeal reminded me of something my grandfather used to say: good boundaries make honest neighbors. He wasn't just talking about property lines. He meant the moral boundaries that keep society fair and just. In the end, this wasn't about winning against a Karen or an HOA. It was about restoring integrity to a community that had lost its way. 6 months later, something unexpected happened. Brenda's elderly mother, who I'd never met, came to my door, tearfully. She explained that her daughter's actions stemmed from financial desperation after her husband's medical bankruptcy. Meridian had promised to clear their debts in exchange for helping acquire properties. It doesn't excuse what she did, the woman said, but she started with good intentions before greed took over. She's paying for her mistakes now and wanted me to deliver this. She handed me a sealed envelope containing a handwritten apology and information about other targeted properties in various counties. I provided this evidence to investigators, potentially saving dozens more homeowners from similar schemes. Indiscretions. This information led to a broader ethics investigation that uncovered a pattern of blackmail used against public servants throughout the region. In an ironic twist, the new community guidelines developed by the restructured HOA are now being used as a model for other neighborhoods. They focus on true community welfare rather than property control, with special protections for historical properties and agricultural lands. This experience changed our community forever. Where there was once division, neighbors now understand the importance of standing together against those who would exploit our differences. Have you experienced HOA overreach or neighbor disputes over property rights? Share your story below. Remember, always know your property boundaries. Keep documentation of everything, and don't be intimidated by those who count on your silence. Most importantly, if you witness injustice, speak up. Your courage might not just save your property, it could protect your entire community from those who abuse power for profit. Thanks for joining me today. If this story helped you understand your rights better, Hit subscribe for more content about protecting what matters. Until next time, remember that good fences make good neighbors, but only when they're built on honesty, respect, and true community values.